Hi, everyone. It's another episode of Nam Talks podcast. Let me introduce our guests. We've got Csongor Barabasi on board, who is a technical co-founder of Fuel, a Germany-based startup trying to bring art via a no-code NFT platform. We also got Katarina and Misha, who represent ARSNL. Katarina is VP and head of business development over there, and Misha is a co-founder of ARSNL. And they also try to basically meet art and Web3 in their project. We're going to discuss how tech reimagines art and which is actually one of the oldest industries. So this is what we're going to cover today. So welcome, everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Kash.
Hi, nice to be here.
Yeah. The first topic for today will be actually about something that we all discuss frequently: empowering and disempowering artists. So basically, when we think of technology and NFTs and art, how do you think that works when it comes to empowerment thing?
Sure. I guess I'll start it off. Thank you again so much, Kasha. I think it's very empowering to artists now to be able to function outside of the kind of traditional art market. There's definitely a lot more sort of control or agency an artist has about putting out their work, when to put out their work, how they want to be seen. All of those things have sort of broken down in the system, I would say, so that the gallery model is not as necessary. I mean, I do think this comes with a flip side, which we can talk about afterwards, which is sort of disempowering, but that's, I think, a huge point of empowerment for artists, and clearly why a lot of creators are really interested in this space.
Katarina, you mentioned something very important, like showcasing the art, which happens in the traditional way model. It happens through museums, through galleries. How that may change,
Well, now sort of, I mean, I guess Web3 wasn't the first to do this, right? I mean, social media has sort of paved the way for this in the sense that anybody could be a curator, anybody could be their own publicist. Now, of course, the difference is that you can sell things without an intermediary, the way you would have to through traditional social media channels. Another thing that I think is, incredibly interesting for us and very empowering is the ability to build in royalties then. I mean, this is something that is not done in the traditional space. It is, in fact, in Europe, but not in the States. And that is something that the gallery and auction house models have, purposefully rejected because it does not probably serve their agenda, but it certainly serves an artist's agenda. So it's incredible now, and I think it's indicative of that trend, or rather what Web3 allows, which is artists to really sort of be their own, curator, manager, publicist, and all the rest. Those things can be very exhausting, I should add, and they might detract from actually creating artwork, as, I'm not an artist, but as I could imagine. But it's also extremely empowering because, you're not at the behest of others saying what's worthy to be seen and when.
Definitely adding to that, just a couple of thoughts from more a technological perspective, and it's happening across the board, not only in art, but in every single creative industry, is this empowerment of the creators, which beforehand it wasn't happening. But at the end, if we think why the internet is useful for us day by day and why we enjoy consuming it, it's because we have the creators putting out the content that is worth it to enjoy and consume. But so far, only the big corporates were benefiting from that. So now the model is totally switched, and all the power is going back into the hands of the builders and the creators of the internet, which again sounds like a more fairer word. And it's like almost like Web 1, but now with a lot more money in the ecosystem.
I would just add maybe that while the tools are there to be able to create and to put your art or music out there and to sell it, but if you're a great artist, doesn't mean that you're a great marketer, right? And so the ability to market successfully and to essentially command a certain following that would translate into some kind of ultimate revenue for the artists is actually a difficult puzzle to solve for a lot of them, because not all of them are social personalities that are equipped to be able to handle it. And so there is something to say that there's still a role for the intermediaries in the space. Even again, the tools are out there, but to use them successfully is a challenge.
On that, I think the social dynamics in the space don't change so much from Web 2 to Web 3, because if you think about, let's say, Super Rare is in the space, you could say that it's a Web 3 gallery, right? They also do the curation, they take their fees, and they do the marketing for you, they do the community building. But in the same time, now there is a chance to have another breed of artists born and appearing in the space. And that is, at least at Fuel, we like to call them the entrepreneurial artists. And we know that it's not easy at all, but there is a chance for you. If you know how to market yourself, how to sell yourself, create online content, plus you also have great art, then now is your chance to truly sell your art on your own terms.
Would you say that NFTs basically become part of the merch for the artist, and basically you have to have some fan base and it's basically based on the brand that's already existing?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of artists think that they come into the space and it's like a quick money. You will earn and make a lot of money immediately, but those days are over. That was 2021 when it was a gold rush, and whatever you sold, it was bought. And that's the easy times of NFT space. But now we traverse toward a more mature phase where only quality will be sold, because 90% of the NFTs out there are these PFP collections, which is not real art. There is still a big group of traditional quality, amazing artists out there who don't know what Web3 is. They don't know what NFT is. So when we manage to get those people in the space, then we will increase the quality of the NFTs that are out there.
Okay. Thank you for this. What I wanted to switch into a little bit is also some other ways of tech influencing art. Because I know that, as far as I know, Andy Warhol is also part of ARS, right, Katarina? And he was also, one of the most and first influential artists who actually used modern technology. I'm recalling his drawings on an Amiga computer, basically. Now, it's been years later, and it's much more advanced. For example, if you use AR for representing some art piece, it can evolve and change over time, because you can moderate that later, and you've got some, activation image, but you can display different stuff. Yes, so this is one of the things. Yes, the other way would be definitely the way you showcase art. Yes, because even museums for some time now do online collections, but also there are the first movers in the metaverse, like Decentraland, yes, where there are galleries, museums, and you can showcase art over there. So if we could land here for a little bit and discuss what are different ways, apart from NFTs, that can influence art, and the other way around. Yes.
I mean, I think just to add, because we're talking about digital content, so you can have in-person experiences, you could have online experiences, and there could be virtual experiences. I think gaming industry is super exciting because they're kind of way ahead in terms of creating interactive engagements that can foreseeably allow artists to create artworks that involve thousands of users that can kind of engage with one another through a piece of art. So really there's now kind of a brainstorm happening as far as what are the best platforms and ways to engage audience, and artists probably are at the forefront in developing these types of experiences, because they are the ones that are ultimately trying to figure out beyond creation of their pieces, but where these pieces are most effective and how they can be most effective. And this is also kind of important for platforms and studios that are helping artists to help them imagine, because the artists don't always know the possibilities, and being at the kind of forefront and seeing it, even like you're mentioning things like Decentraland, for most artists that doesn't mean anything. They don't even fully understand why that should be interesting, and even beyond that, how to create an engaging experience in these spaces, because a lot of these metaverses right now are quite lonely experiences, right? You walk in and you're there by yourself, and you could venture around, and sometimes it kind of, you fail to understand how to engage people in a place where there are no people, right? And how do you create artworks that would be engaging in these types of environments? I think all of it are super important questions to ask, and for all of us to try to figure out. And I do think it's an evolving situation, that probably 5 years from now, it's going to be a very different setting, that we'll be discussing new platforms and new ways for engagement.
As far as I know, there's no one actually really succeeding in engagement when it comes to the metaverses. So secluded spaces, yes, that's what's happening, but we'll see.
I mean, yeah. And I would say that sometimes that's not true. Every once in a while, you do have gatherings, and again, imagination is infinite, and people are creating interesting experiences that are virtual. And I do think that there is a lot of possibility in that. And so we just have to give it time and kind of evolve.
And Csongor, I know that you are a fan of AI, and there's definitely also a concept of AI generated art. So if you would like to pop in, feel free to go.
Yeah, I've been in the AI space a long time ago, mainly on the generative side, but in the very early days. So I was actually working on enhancing ID pictures for biometric verification. But then I exited the space and dived full into the rabbit hole, as they say. But recently, I've been using this DALL-E, and it's absolutely fabulous what it can do. Like, I'm surprised. On the other hand, I'm very pissed about the way that people use it, and that they try to benefit from it and sell it as their artwork and as NFT. I think that is absolutely not fair for the art market, because that's not your art. I mean, some people say it's your art, but I think that it's not your art. It's just an AI that generated it. So I have dual opinions on it, I would say.
Oh, Csongor, that's so interesting. So you think all sort of AI generative art you wouldn't call art with a capital A, sort of?
If you wrote the code, then yes, it's if you as an artist wrote that piece of code, then it's all yours. Like, it's your IP basically. But when you are using DALL-E and then selling that as being your art, like, you didn't write that code, and it's not your merit, the output. You just wrote a fancy sentence.
So how about people in the like traditional world? Do you see this as a difference for those who have, I don't know, 20, 200 assistants working to kind of to materialize their idea? Would you think that that's something akin to this in a way? Like, I'm talking about artists, of course. I mean, most successful artists have tons of studio people, but like even more specifically, like Jeff Koons and Richard Prince, who sort of famously don't touch their work. I see it as almost analogous to that in a way.
I have to say I am not familiar with those intricacies yet, but I would be very curious to learn more about it.
Yeah, sure. There are artists whose work sell for, $60 million, $80 million who famously, just have studio assistants doing their work. They come up with the concept or the ideas, but they're not actually, physically doing anything, which sort of strikes me as somewhat similar.
The missing component to me was this kind of emotion, because in art, emotion is very important part of the whole thing, of the whole process. I think that's the reason why people actually, some piece of art generates some kind of emotion in the consumer side. Yes. And to be honest, I was even digging before our conversation because I was trying to find an example where you actually can sort of mix AI generated art together with the emotions. And I found a really, really interesting artist. His name is Alexandre Reben. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but what he's basically doing, he's an MIT graduate. And what he's doing is actually, he invented an algorithm which is called like amalgam. That's how it's called. What it does, it basically reads his emotion and transforms that into art. So he sort of guides guides it the way it does things, but he can't control his emotions. So it's very natural. And I think it's sort of interesting how he combines those humanity and technology aspects.
One of the reasons I moved away from AI was especially once it started to get into this emotional exploration of it. Because at least before starting to work in the art space, I was used to the business world where all decisions are made based on like rational. But then suddenly when I started working with artists, it's all about the feelings. How do I feel today? And then that's what really makes us human. And then it's like, then creativity flows from you. You create music, you create art. And then why would you like to create AI to take even that away from you, right? Because like we had the evolution of first came the laptop that enhances our brain so we don't have to store everything. Now it comes AI, which can do billions and billions of transactions so we don't have to do the complex mathematics. But the emotional side, I really don't want to work on taking that away from a human being because that's what is making us human. So at least these are just my 2 cents. I think AI is in an amazing state where it can enhance our day-to-day productivity, but when it comes to emotions, creation, they still have a long way to go, I think.
Okay, so we've actually talked a lot about how can tech influence art. We've talked about, AI-driven art. We talked about NFTs. I'd like to get back to the topic that we touched a little bit earlier, which is basically democracy in the art world, access to investors, access to also tools for consuming art, selling art, releasing art pieces. I definitely feel the change, the revolution that is happening as a good one on the other side, on the one side, because it allows everyone access to investors, to collectors. But on the other side, I see that we may have a space populated with valueless pieces, basically, yes, and a lot of it. And people actually who try to engage into the whole environment, which is open to everyone, might actually get lost. So they don't see more value in having easy access because it's too much of everything. But maybe, I'm a pessimist here.
I think, sorry, I'll kick us off. I'm sure everybody here has a lot to say about it. Okay, well, when it comes to collectors, I think that, again, the same rules, fortunately or unfortunately, apply in Web3 as they have in the traditional art space, which is that there are certain collectors who are sort of blue chip collectors, like ironically, it should be about the artist, not about what collection you are placed in. Even selling these Stella NFTs, as we're doing sort of in pre-sale, people have been putting me in touch with these collectors that it would be good for these works to be placed in those collections. It would somehow benefit the project itself. This is something that isn't all that dissimilar from the art world. However, it's much more transparent. Now I think it's a little bit about as well the amplification that these collectors that have become like, these whale collectors, they are also influencers in the space. They're not like traditional collectors who someone whether loves art, sees as an investment, whatever. It's much more behind the scenes. So in a way, placing things in their collection, of course, you're doing so that they market it themselves. And this is sort of an interesting and new paradigm, I think, that has arisen. It's not very democratizing, I would say. I mean, the access to the collectors is there, of course, because their Twitter and their Discord, you could access them. It doesn't mean that they're going to, answer you when you do ping them. But certainly that's a lot more, I mean, the barrier to entry is certainly lower than if you wanted to talk to a curator at the MoMA, and could not find that person's number or something like this. But yeah, I'm not sure if it's a true democratization is, I guess, what I'm, driving at.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but in classic art, there's this like investment component that you actually traditionally choose an artist to support, basically. And with the NFTs, what I often see is that people buy NFTs and they go for a resale, like straight away. So it's not really like, I really do want to support an artist through this, and I treat it as an investment. Let's see how his brand gonna evolve. Yes, in future, I'm just going into resale. Any thoughts on that?
I think that's true for a lot of projects. I mean, to go back to the Warhol Foundation, who put out, 3 Warhol NFTs last year, 3 Sotheby's. I could be wrong, but I believe that none of them have resold yet. The buyers of those have held on to them. So I think, I mean, obviously that's Warhol, it's a concrete example, but I do think, again, everything is still jumbled with PFPs and collectibles and fine art. But also a lot of artists, fine artists, I'm thinking about Damien Hirst here, have encouraged that too. I mean, that's kind of was part of his project, which was 10,000 dot paintings, where the purchaser eventually could either redeem the work for a physical or could keep the NFT itself. He was playing on, it's called, the economy, or economies, whatever it's called. He's playing on that concept too, and sort of, poking fun at that concept as well. So yeah, I think it's all really jumbled now, and artists are maybe, I don't know, there's a commentary there to be made, perhaps, if that helps.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting because, okay, I could, for example, take a stab at it from a different side, because ultimately, if you think about traditional collecting, you're right that we're talking about artworks that are much more scarce and less prone to speculative buy. And of course, we just went through, as Csongor mentioned, like kind of a gold rush in the space, which attracted a lot of speculation, because that's what happens, when things all of a sudden you could buy today and sell like 5 times the price tomorrow, it attracts speculation. But there's another side of things, as far as, even with the Stella sale, we are ultimately producing close to 2,000 tokens. It's not a rare, super like scarce object. And that was partially came from Stella's in a sense, because if they wanted to sell a unique Stella, they would have done it through traditional art institutions and venues. The Web3 space is about trying to attract a much larger community. The word community is thrown around almost immediately when talking about projects. And even though I don't like this word, because ultimately you are talking about kind of individuals and collectors that have different motivations as far as why they're there in the first place.
It's a finance motivation, yes?
No, like, I mean, like, think about it. Let's say I'm an artist and I don't have a strong fan base, or maybe I do, but ultimately I can't be there all the time to create conversations around my piece. You essentially are creating this like community of thousands of users, and for them you need to produce ultimately thousands of artworks, these NFTs. Now it could be a single artwork that could be fractured into 1,000 fragments, or it could be PFP collection, but ultimately you're creating a group that all of a sudden becomes active and engaged, and they start spreading the word around the project, they also are communicating with each other. It's a very different than, that I would think in terms of just traditional collecting, where maybe it happens, but on a much, much smaller and intimate scale, where you can acquire an artwork and have a dinner party and discuss it. But this is something where you, I guess, through the power of digital and internet and Web3, you create this kind of conversation chamber through which you can start communicating with the collectors or with this community. And ultimately, it even create artworks that are specifically designed for large groups of people. And it's not necessarily that you're doing it to, well, first of all, by doing that, also you are giving yourself the freedom to charge a much smaller price for your artwork. Artworks are very expensive and time intensive to produce. You can't put it out there and sell it for $200 because you just spent 3-4 months working on it. We could look at it, its negatives, but also its positives. And I think there are actually quite a few positives. And I think it will cause the artworks also to evolve to focus on these communities, because yes, it's interesting because now a lot of talk is about utilities, right? And these tokens and artworks have an embedded utility. It's almost like the artwork becomes like a ticket to a movie theater, that ultimately, besides the ticket itself being an artwork, it also can give you access to something else. And whether it's something else is right now, or maybe it's something else that's in the future.
I would say what is interesting from a technology perspective with the blockchain is that even though people will come in the space and start flipping the art that they buy, the NFTs, one thing that they forget is that all the data is open and everyone can see it. So similarly, how in the beginning it starts with cryptocurrency, and for example, if you in blockchain, you have all these validators and the nodes, and if you are a malicious actor in the space, you get slashed, you get some penalty. Or when we move to proof of stake, you lose your stake that you put in the network. The same way with the new collectors that come in the space, and then they start flipping again and again, all the data will be on the blockchain and can be analyzed. So it's not much time to just get to a point where all these allow lists that we start building up before the launch of a project, they will also have heavy data analysis on top. And then who will be prioritized? Well, the artist can choose. Do you want the flippers in your community, or you want the long-term holders who add value to the community, who keep your NFT for a long time, join your Discord, and all this can be analyzed. All this is on the blockchain, and then suddenly the flippers and the money makers might get penalized in the traditional artwork and the artists who come into the Web3 space.
We are kind of forming our allow list for the Frank Stella sale. And this is something we're kind of going to announce this week, but our focus, at least initially, is on Artist Rights Society members and trying to kind of get more traditional artists and other members of Artist Rights Society to be engaged. Because, to some extent, ARSNL is... came out of Artist Rights Society, and it's important to reward those members to have this ability to enter the space and to educate themselves through Frank Stella's work, which they know very well, and this is maybe a way for them to kind of learn more about NFTs and blockchain and how it works.
Yeah, it's super important, I think, to analyze. Yeah, to analyze and to vet your allow list is critical. Like, we just had one project about 1.5 months ago, and we were super excited that we had like 4,000 people on the allow list, and we only had 500 NFTs, and how cool. Then we did some data analysis. Turned out that one person owned 600 accounts, and it was, yes, and then we just knew who to slash. Sorry, you are out. Yeah.
And I'm going to, first of all, I made a mistake. The Damien Hirst drop was the currency, just to let you know, not the economy, I just realized. But I was just going to add, I sound like a broken record, but I think there is a lot of truth to this. I mean, I'm sure that artists don't like, I'm now talking about in even the traditional space, don't like their work being flipped. But I think the real thing that they hate about their work being flipped is that they don't get to see any of the rewards of their work being flipped. I mean, you can imagine how frustrating it is to have something sold at auction for, let's say, and I'm purposely choosing large numbers, but $500,000, that's an artist that's on the rise, and then 5 years later for that work to go on resale for $5 million on the secondary market. That is extraordinarily frustrating and frankly not really fair. Almost all creators do get sort of remunerated by residuals or royalties. Actors, singers, writers, kind of fine artists are the one creator class that really doesn't. So this, at least, if it's flipping, a percentage goes back to them. Well, at least they get to reap the rewards of that. And it's not just the middlemen who are able to capture some financial benefit.
This is one of the coolest thing actually about NFTs, I think. But the fact that you can generate more and more income with the flow of time, so yeah. But when I invited you on a podcast, I also mentioned that we love to share with our listeners something that is very easy to get hold of when it comes to some insights. And what's very intriguing to me, and I was actually planning to ask you this, is about those NFT audience that is actually doing transaction. What's intriguing to me, and I think to our listeners is as well, is like, is it a totally different audience than the traditional one? Like, how because you are watching, you are observing the wait lists, yes, and our low lists. You go through them, see like, okay, these are somehow related people from the current traditional art network, or in your Csongor case, maybe the fan base, yes, by the artist, or maybe it's more of NFT collectors, basically, which are a little bit outside the traditional art enthusiasts, yes. Maybe some of them have never set foot in a museum or gallery, yes, or haven't been to a concert of a given artist, yes. How what are your observations? Like, how is it different, like classic art collectors and NFT audience?
At least from our experience, there is not one size fits all, because it really depends. We initially had more experience in the music space, just as an information, but like it wasn't that one size fits all. Like some artists were trying to push NFTs and their audience was like, no, 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 we don't want that. That is not how we are here. That's not why we follow you. Please don't. And for other artists, the audience was like very embracing. And then you have the option to either bridge your audience if they are embracing NFTs, bridge them into the world, offer them basically more ownership in what you do, more insight, and get those 1,000 true fans closer to you. Or then you have the option to just expand into the Web3 space and build out your brand again from zero, build out your Web3 audience. Because as well, when you have multiple social media accounts, you have one type of audience on Instagram, another type on TikTok, who might be the younger generation, and now it's just a third type, which is the Web3, where there's a bit more money and transaction involved. So from our experience, every artist has to basically talk with their community, with their existing audience, see if it fits. If not, then be courageous enough to just enter the Web3 space, share what they are about, and then for sure they will find some people who will like your art.
Of course, if you go back in time, a lot of people who made money in crypto and just kind of that were involved in the space early on, we're talking about mostly male under the age of 35, which is not kind of your typical, doesn't necessarily describe your average traditional collector. But it's true what Csongor is saying in terms of depending on the artist and their specific following and the type of project, your audience will change. And it certainly, as just NFT collecting and the space in general becoming more mainstream, you have a lot more diversity in terms of the collector base. I would say that it's probably to some extent still heavily biased to similar situation that was 2 years ago, but over time, hopefully, will become more representative of the actual following of the artist. The following that they have communicated with through their socials on Instagram and other channels is probably going to eventually become the following that will be purchasing their blockchain-based artworks.
But this is somehow a choice also you have to make when promoting your drops, like the drop stronger for your clients, and the same for ARSNL's clients, like whether to target with the campaign promo, because you already mentioned that the marketing of the whole thing is very important. Yes, so whether to target the collectors, the art collectors, or whether to target, or your fan base, yes, or whether to target NFT audience, or maybe both. Like, but isn't it too much to target both at a time?
From our experience, targeting both doesn't necessarily work, because like we could take the example of Coinbase. They tried to launch the NFT marketplace. They were trying to target everyone, build this Instagram like very social NFT marketplace, and it was a huge flop. Like nobody went there because they targeted the Web3 audience and also thinking the Web2, because it's like Instagram like, but then your early adopters are the Web3 people, and they just said no, this is not what we want. It didn't work out. So from a product and like a product mindset and a startup mindset, it's always best to start with one customer segment and then later expand, rather than trying to catch two rabbits, run after two rabbits and you catch none.
What I think is important is to make it simple in terms of the tools, like allow credit card purchases, allow like simple like email based wallets where you don't need to kind of go through the process of like basically creating tools that allow people to easily enter the space. That I think is super critical in terms of trying to appeal to both audiences. Of course, like you do it because ultimately you want to you want to make your project commercially viable, and you want to find the audience for the project. And so if you could try, in our case, because we're doing a Frank Stella NFT, it's generally Frank Stella's following is generally from traditional space, but we do want to educate, let's call them, even though like let's call them crypto buyers or crypto NFT buyers. We want to educate them about Stella and about his work, and we do hope that they participate in this work somehow. Now, do we spend all our resources to go after both groups? No, but we certainly try to do publications in different medias, some that are more geared towards crypto audience or blockchain based like this kind of art and technology audiences, but also just traditional art collectors as well through art publications.
It's a slight deviation from the point, but I'll just, give an anecdote about this particular Frank Stella sale. We've been in communication with a couple of curators. These are traditional curators from really big museums. And one, fingers crossed, but it looks like will make a museum acquisition, which is a huge deal for us. But it begs the question, is it a huge deal for the crypto audience at all? It's wonderful and it's validating, and it's certainly, I think, a fantastic thing for the artist and just kind of to show where this evolution has gone. But is anyone going to care? Is that going to translate to sales? Perhaps not. So I don't have the answers, but certainly trying to figure them out. If anybody else does, give me a call.
That is definitely positive PR for the space when a museum comes and buys an NFT from a reputable artist. So I would definitely look at it as something very positive, because it's quite hard to convince already reputable brands and galleries in the space to make this leap, because they are afraid, oh, what does the media say? Well, what would the people say? But if they have the courage to do it, That is amazing. That's we need more of that in the space, because we have a PR problem. We don't have a technology problem right now. It's more all the negative sentiment and media that is happening around crypto and NFTs.
Yeah, there's lots of bad stuff happening, and I think one of the things is due to the copyright as well. Yes, and the speculative value, that's the other thing. But copyright, because I think even today, Csongor, you mentioned that you actually have everyone can access a file. Yes, of course, not everyone has a certificate. Yes, but everyone can access a file, and I think that some people know it, yes, basically, and they can make use of it. That's the first thing. And the other one is actually the freedom in judgment, whether you've got a copyright or not. Because I remember some time ago there was a case of Quentin Tarantino, who actually minted 7 scenes from Pulp Fiction. He was a film director, but the Paramount sued him because basically he wasn't the script's legal owner. Yes, so where's the boundary here? It's very, very difficult, and there are no regulations. Yes, as far as I know, neither in Europe or in US. Yes.
Well, I think that the regulations are de facto what our copyright laws are. I mean, there's so many examples of exactly what you're saying that are just like one more colorful than the next. I don't know if you all remember when a DAO bought a first edition of Dune at Christie's and paid something like 300 times more than what the listing price was. Because, I mean, why? I'm not quite sure about that. But regardless, they had the money, but with the hopes of then, using character rights and things like that. I mean, that is just remarkable that a group of people who can come up with $3 million, none amongst them realize that a first edition book does not come with it anything besides that is what you're buying. It's just the first edition book. Copyright, which is what kind of my specialty is in and what I've worked in for a long time, it evades people a lot for some reason. I think it's because it's usually, they say about copyright, it's a defense. It's not an argument, right? Like, we use intellectual property right to defend things. We don't go out and kind of state it in the same way. But the de facto rule continues to remain. If you created a work, the work is yours for after your death, 70 years after your death. This is why we still represented ARS, people like Matisse, who are about to fall off copyright, but his heirs, his estate still controls all of it until 70 years after his death. This is no different in the NFT space, but there is this sort of libertarian attitude, of course, and I guess just confusion because it's new technology, but it's a little mind-boggling to me that people haven't put together that it's just the same kind of rules apply. Whether or not people are monitoring the rules in the same way, that's another question altogether. But legally speaking, the owner of the copyright, and in the example of Tarantino, yeah, he was the director, but he didn't own the IP for the film, of course. The studio did, or whoever else did. So yeah, I guess that's my long and short answer. I don't see how it's really any different than it has always been.
Yeah, where I think it gets kind of interesting is just projects like the Bored Apes Yacht Club, and now artists following suit, where they are they're basically declaring that some of the copyright is transferred with the NFT. And so that while, probably 99% of the NFTs fall under the traditional space, you have these cases. And for example, with the Frank Stella sale, we're transferring some rights with the token as well. And we will try to delineate these rights, in the agreement so that it's part of the NFT itself, like where collectors can 3D print the models or these geometries for personal use, or they can create certain derivative works as well. But that's not something that's common to majority of cases. And as Katarina mentioned, majority fall under just traditional rules.
One thing which I wanted to add on that a bit earlier, but haven't had a chance, it's actually, I love this new way of collecting art. You just buy a Stella and then it's in your wallet. Because for example, I don't own a house. I just rent. I like to stay minimalist. I like to travel around, and I don't want to carry around the Stella with me. But maybe in 5, 10 years, when I settle down, then I will be so happy that I bought it back then, and now I can order it, and it's 3D printed, and it is in my home. So I just wanted to add from a young generation perspective, I think it's amazing that you can just collect it and then redeem whenever you want. That is
one short question from my side, the last one, because we have to wrap it up. Just try to name one biggest tech challenge in bringing art into NFT world.
I don't know. Like, I mean, I think it's still quite raw, and things just need to be tightened up, and just, we do, as Katarina mentioned, like a lot of things online without understanding how it's working or why it's working, and certainly a lot more tools are going to be built, and you're going to have maybe, okay, one challenge could be like if there was a lot more adoption from even like hardware manufacturers. Your Apple iPhone, why can't it come with a crypto wallet already embedded somehow? There are certain things that big tech companies can do to make lives way easier for everyone. And so if that's solved, that certainly would facilitate adoption, and it will also allow people to create things that are much more appealing to a wider audience. If everybody had it on their phone, and that's your ultimately, this is your museum, your gallery, your exhibition space. Let's leave that as my answer.
from my end. I would add that right now, although it's not a tech challenge, but it's more on the regulatory side. So making sure that we protect the artists that work with us and want to sell the NFTs, because like accepting a credit card doesn't work just by signing up to Stripe, because they have NFTs on their radar, and you have to go through a complex due diligence process, which an everyday artist wouldn't do. Like, it's just not feasible to get a lawyer and prepare all that. So I would say that a challenge for our team that I keep thinking about is that how can we empower that process from a technology perspective and make it easier for artists to sell their NFTs, accept the familiar fiat currency, but in the same time be protected from a regulatory perspective.
And I would just add from the IP side, I think that there is a challenge in sort of monitoring the space and policing the space without ruining the fun of the space. I think that is going to be a challenge for whoever undertakes it. And hopefully ARSNL will help with this. But how do you make sure the creators' rights continue to be protected in the space while also not ostracizing the base of the space and again ruining the party for everyone? I think that that's a technological challenge that that will be interesting to see how it gets solved.
But on the other hand, Misha, I really hope that big tech doesn't solve it. That's why we have the chance to compete. If they solve it first, then I think we will end up in a centralization space in some shape or form again. So still fingers crossed. We hope in the future that we can solve it.
And to wrap it up, what we've definitely discussed and learned today, or confirmed today, is that art and technology is like a complex relationship. Basically, it's not an easy thing. They definitely overlap more and more, but we have to wait more to see how that's going to end. Thank you.